All right, and we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Kayfabe Corner here, where I sit down. Jordan Pierce-Jones, one of the legendary people here in professional wrestling in Florida. Here, I'm here, the one, the only, the hardcore giant, Ron and Niemi. Ron, how are you today, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. It's been a while since
Absolutely.
I've seen you.
Yeah, it's been a little while here. Last time we saw each other, when was it? It's been a little while since I've actually seen you too. Yeah, probably
Yeah,
RPW,
I
maybe even.
think IPW or maybe the last Real Pro show that
Yeah.
me and Frankie came down for, but time flies. I think everyone's kind of thrown off as far as timeline-wise with everyone was so geared up for Mania weekend, and then that just, imploded for everybody. And then, nobody's been able to regroup since. So, I mean, other than online, nobody's really seen each other as far as wrestling or anything else for that matter.
Yeah, I mean, in fact, to talk about that, you had some stuff going on during Mania weekend as well over at, what was it, 81 Brewery? You were gonna have you were had some stuff packed up for you, huh?
Yeah, we had the tickets were doing well, and I expected the shows to be packed, but it was almost kind of like the best kept secret. I mean, we had ICW New York was going to be in with, I don't know if you happen to see the lineup for that show. It was just absolutely, completely ridiculous. And
Oh yeah, yeah.
yeah, that was going to be packed. And then we had Zach Ryder and Kurt Hawkins podcast with the collectible toy deal that was going to be there. And we were, kind of keep it under wraps, but there was going to be all kinds of surprises there, including some WWE guys that we weren't allowed to announce. And of
Mm,
course, IPW Hardcore Wrestling was, that's my deal. And myself and Steve Madison had put so much
right.
into it, and that was going to be a huge show. I'm going to tell you the match that never happened that I'm hoping to beat everybody to the punch, at least down here. Zach Cooper and Logan Creed had so much buzz behind it. And just Zach, it was kind of like return of the hometown hero. I mean, he's a legit Tampa born and bred, talent. And as far as I'm concerned, probably one of the biggest stars that is just kind of now starting to find his legs. And, I had talked to Mr. St. Laurent about him over the last year or so, and was doing the best I could to plant the seeds in there. And truth is I don't think there was much help needed. Zach had caught fire, and him and along with Logan Creed and Eric Stevens
Yeah.
all signing around the same time. I know Logan's really a Georgia guy, but I consider him one of my guys and a Florida guy. So to see all that stuff happen at once, I got to tip my hat to Court Bauer. He's not a fan of mine. I've been a thorn in his side for all the way back to the very beginning of MLW. I'd say we have a love-hate relationship, but there's never been any real hate. He's in charge of his promotion and his shows, and I'm usually 100% in charge of what I do, and I'm not the most easy to deal with, and have really ruffled his feathers a few times. But on the flip side, they seem to recognize I think I got an eye for talent. I think they believe that when I recommend somebody, it's a lot of respect as far as I'm concerned that they even look.
Mm.
So the fact that some of these guys have gotten
You got a
opportunities,
good track record. They listen to. Yeah.
it's cool, man. And truth is I mean, look, you got Snoop Strikes there just killing it. Hell,
Absolutely.
you've even got Dax underneath, doing a hell of a job on the road. I mean, and I've always liked him as a guy. I always thought he was a hard worker. Did I?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I never thought I would see him there. I think it's a great example for the young guys that are under him with Tampa Bay Pro. I mean, if he can grind and make it there, why can't they? So
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's great. I was there for Snoop's first match in a battle royal at Uproar, and to see him grow, that's great. That's what I want to see for everyone, man. And he's done the right things. You mentioned Dax. He was actually on the show a few weeks ago.
a lot of these guys, as far as I'm concerned, let's be honest, the WWN and Evolve and FIP and these guys, they've given some of them opportunities, but you want to talk about missing the boat on these guys. The fact that Logan slipped through their fingers and Snoop, and there's going to be plenty more. I mean, how much longer can Troy Hollywood and Hunter Law be on, on the indies where we're lucky. It's one of those, careful for what you wish for. I want to see these guys get opportunities. I've always been very high on Troy. I have on Hunter too. And it's my fault I haven't got him on as many shows as I like, but that's no indication of my opinion of him and his work and as a person. But we kind of get spoiled when these guys are, when you run Real Pro, especially during the week on a weekday, man, you could book a dream show if you want to. It just comes down to the
Yeah,
budget.
no, there is so many guys out there, guys and girls, so talented. You mentioned two more that I absolutely love. Hunter Law, I'm so high on, and yeah, Troy's great as well. That whole class too. It almost sounds like we're loving on that Tampa Bay class, but there's a good class there. You can't deny.
Jay Lethal's always done a good job, and the truth is, he's just one of many schools throughout Florida that have done their part to contribute to the next generation of pro wrestling and the talent that will be involved. Call a spade a spade. There's plenty of schools out there too that they should be shut down and ran out of town with pitchforks and torches, as far as I'm concerned. It's just if you're the type, some people say, if maybe if you're not the best player, you'd be better off as a coach. I've never really felt that way about pro wrestling. I've always felt either you get it or you don't. And there's a lot that don't, and several of them are training talents who don't know any better. The good thing is there's opportunities now that, I guess, just like college, like the NCAA, you can transfer now at almost a moment's notice. With professional wrestling schools, you can just up and leave and go to the next one. And when you've got the veterans out there on the scene that have the knowledge that they do, these young guys and girls should be reaching out and getting advice whenever possible. And sometimes these are questions they might be afraid to ask. And be careful who you're asking them of, because a lot of times, it's a cruel business. One of the oldest tricks in the book is to give people bad advice or lead them down the wrong path for fear that if they come up, they might take your spot, which is about as cowardly and spineless as it gets. But there's some guys out
Do you
there
still find that very prevalent even today? Do you think that's still very prevalent, or?
Yes. The best example I can give is when Logan Creed was talking to MLW, all of a sudden there was this interest from the WWE side they've been aware of him since, the day he set foot in a wrestling ring. But when he was on all these WWN shows, he was right in front of their face too, as far as, working basically for the feeder system to NXT. And never heard a peep, never an indication of, hey, why don't you come in for some extra work or for a tryout? And all of a sudden MLW gets interest, and somebody got word to the WWE, and all of a sudden they were expressing interest in Logan, but not really offering anything. And for some reason, a talent that is almost a carbon copy of him as far as size, height, look, even the bald part of the gimmick, he seemed to be kind of leading him that way. That I don't know. It just seemed like it was bad advice that was meant to lead somebody away from the best opportunity for fear of maybe if he was to come up, he may take their spot. That might be me with 20 years in the business being a little paranoid, but it is what it is. I watched that with the Shane brothers for 10 years or so. Every single veteran team that they would talk to them would get really upset and mad at them and tell them to quit bumping for everybody. You're too big. Don't sell. Don't bump. Watch old Warriors tapes and do what they're doing. Then all of a sudden they're booked in the ring with these exact same teams, and they're bumping them all over the goddamn place like a pinball. And I never quite got that, whether it was the Nasty Boys, hell, even Public Enemy, teams that had been around forever. They just started giving them all this advice that is probably what the WCW or WWE would tell them. But if you don't want them bumping for anybody and you don't want them selling, then why do you have them doing it for you? That don't make any sense.
Absolutely. We'll talk a little bit more about them later for sure. And I wonder if we want to get into that as well. Let's trail all the way back here and talk more specifically about you, sir. Where does your journey, or let's not even go farther than that, where does your love begin? Are you a lifetime fan? Did you get into it later? Where does your start in pro wrestling, just even as a fan, begin?
I still remember it clearly. I was at my grandma and grandpa's house around, it was either late 82 or early 83. I can't remember. And they fell asleep, so I stayed up later than I was supposed to. And there was this channel out of Green Bay, I think it was WLUC, and they had All-Star Wrestling on Saturday night. And it was matches, I want to say it was out of Minneapolis or it was out of Green Bay. Basically, it was an AWA arena show being shown on a Saturday night, and I discovered it. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was a Star Wars fan from day one. I've always been huge in the Kiss, and it seemed like the next step of that puzzle was wrestling. And once I discovered it and then found the AWA studio version on Sunday mornings, I was hooked. And it was Nick Bockwinkel was the world heavyweight champion. He managed by Bobby the Brain Heenan. At the time, I believe the tag champs were Ken Patera and Jerry Blackwell, managed by Sheik Adnan Al Casey. You had top guys like Mad Dog Vachon, Baron von Raschke, Dr. D. David Schultz, who's easily one of the most controversial wrestlers in the history of wrestling. Mr. Saito, which is one of the most badass wrestlers, as far as I'm concerned, ever. Insane amateur background, big-time shooter, very dangerous guy. He was the one, this is long before your time, but him and Ken Patera were the ones that ended up going to prison for a few years when they were in the AWA, because the story was they went to McDonald's one night in Green Bay at like 3 a.m. and it wasn't open. So they started throwing these giant boulders through the windows. And when the cops came, I think they like beat the shit out of 6 cops before they were finally brought down and they were put in prison. And actually the WWF played on that when Patera got released and came in. He kind of came in as a babyface because his former manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan, just kept calling him a jailbird and talking down to him, kind of like Patera had no options. And Heenan was the one that gave him the opportunity to come back to wrestling. Of course, Heenan exposed him, took advantage of him, and then Patera turned. So that was a really cool time. My dad was really awesome and would take me. He didn't care at all about wrestling. He would just sit there and read the paper. I was watching it, but yet he would take me to Green Bay to go to Brown County Arena, which was about 3 hours from where I grew up in Ishpeming, Michigan. But I got to see all these names I just mentioned. And then I seen a match in Marquette, Michigan, where it was Hulk against Dr. D. David Schultz on top. And it was bloody and it was crazy and it was really, really heavy hitting. And then Mr. Saito did a run in. And I mean, I've always been big on real serious heat. I love the violence. I love the blood. And I like really well-told storylines. And once I started seeing that side of things, that was it. I was in. And even though I grew up in the middle of nowhere, we always had really good cable. So I remember watching Southwest Championship Wrestling on USA Network before WWF ever even debuted on there. And it was with like Hangman Bobby Jaggers, Bruiser Bob Sweetan, the Sheep Herders before they were the Bushwhackers. Got to see my first Bruiser Brody and Abdullah the Butcher against each other's stuff on there. And it was really violent, very bloody. The owner and promoter was Joe Blanchard, which is Tully Blanchard's father. And when USA Network gave him that platform, and next thing you know, WWF came in and offered to, pay for the spot. Blanchard just didn't see the writing on the wall, didn't understand the national TV exposure compared to your local markets, and he lost it to WWF, and the rest was history. And you may want to look this up one day, too. There was this really old-school cable channel called Financial News Network, and all it would do is run financial and stock trading stuff all day long with a ticker on the bottom of the screen, just like CNN does. But it was all stock stuff over and over all day. Well, at night, instead of running infomercials, they were desperate for content. And somehow, Polynesian Pacific Championship Wrestling ended up on there. Continental Wrestling, which was at the time Paul Heyman's first booking duties. So I was seeing Eddie Gilbert's first family, Lord Humongous, which was Sid Vicious under a mask, a very young Shane Douglas, and it was really violent and really wild. Wildcat Wendell Cooley was the top guy at the time. So I would get all this exposure to this stuff, and it was all so different. And I'd get the magazines, and I would read about Florida Championship, the World Class, and all this other stuff. So fast forward here, by the time I was 19, I went into the Air Force, and I was lucky enough to get stationed at MacDill Air Force Base here in Tampa. I got to the base. First thing I asked the first guy I met was to take me to, I had to go to the Tampa Sportatorium. I had to see it. And I was picturing this arena, this big, vast building. And it was this ugly little tiny pink square block of a building on 106 North Albany. And I didn't care, man. I might as well have been looking at Madison Square Garden, and I was almost like I would sneak in the door there when they on Thursday nights, they'd run their weekly show. And I would take off from the base after work and I'd haul ass down to the Sportatorium. And when the side door would open, I'd sneak in and start setting up chairs and hanging around. And Jimmy Backlund, who was later Jimmy Del Rey, and Mark Starr and guys like that, they'd chase me out. And I'd keep coming back and I'd keep coming back. And eventually I ended up going to Malenko School of Wrestling and also attending. At the time, it was the Monster Factory at the Sportatorium. Larry Sharp had decided to open up there, but Jimmy Del Rey was the trainer, and I hung around at both and just took savage, crazy abusement to chase me off. And 28 years later, here I am.
I was just say, yeah, my notes have it. It was 1991 that you started. Is that about
Yeah,
right?
as a matter of fact, I ran my first show in August of '91, and it was with Superstar, which was Bob Cook. As you know, Bob Cook, everybody knows what I'm talking about. Mick Foley talks about him in his book as being one of the best enhancement guys, and I hate saying that about Bob because he really wasn't an enhancement guy. He's just a total flake and completely afraid to fly in an airplane, so he would only go where he could drive, and ended up basically doing jobs, WCW Saturday Night forever. But it was him under a hood as a superstar against Tex Salinger, which is Mitty and Dennis Knight. And he had his, at the time, it was his stepfather, Captain Ron Slinker, was his manager. So my first show I ever ran was Tex Salinger with Ron Slinker against Superstar, which was Bob Cook. And it was really a tiny little VFW hall on Southdale Mabry in Tampa, but we packed the place. It was really wild. I was selling beers I might as well have been giving it away. And we did a lot of really holy shit angles, a little bit more violence than they're used to, but also technically it was at a different level than what the locals were offering at the time. And from that point, the great Malenko allowed me to start doing his student shows at the Sportatorium. And then I started getting work with the main shows with, to put in perspective, I was 21 and I'm sitting in the Sportatorium dressing room. And at that time, there's Robert Fuller, Dick Slater, Ron or Don Harris, I don't remember which one. Guys like Brady Boone, Dean Malenko, Lou Perez, Cuban Assassin, and Fantasy. And I'm just this stupid Air Force kid who looked like he was 14 years old.
Now, are you wrestling? Are you behind the scenes at this point? Well, what are you doing exactly from day one?
I was a manager right from the very get-go. On today's scene, I'm really not all that short or small anymore. And when I was a manager in the 90s compared to most of the indies now, I was very big. I was just short, but I was in the gym constantly, and I was hanging around monsters, so I always wanted to look like the little version of the monsters. But back then, being 5'6", 175 pounds, not only was I not going to be allowed to wrestle or get any opportunities, I really wasn't going to get an opportunity as a ref or anything else either. But they recognized right from the beginning that I have an extensive, like an encyclopedia when it comes to wrestling, and I could talk, and I had an uncanny ability of making people not like me. I think even some of the ones that I wanted to like me didn't like me. So that translated into a nice spot as a heel manager. And I felt I was good from the beginning, but I look back at videos of it, it's pretty embarrassing stuff, but it was fun.
Yeah, no, same here. Yeah, I talked way too much back in the day. So you started off then. Was it always Ron Niemi? Did you always go by that? And also, too, let's talk about the origin of Hardcore Giant. Got to know about.
It was always a different version. It was Sir Ronald J. Niemi IV was my
first. I saw
first
that,
deal.
Yeah.
And my real name is Ronald James Niemi Jr. My oldest son is the third. So then I just added the Sir deal. I never liked those. I like Sir Oliver Humperdinck. I always got a kick out of the idea he was a sir, and you've seen this slob with this, he'd always have like the Hawaiian shirts unbuttoned and this and that. So I wanted to portray this pain in the ass, just obnoxious asshole that, was trying to pass off the complete ridiculous idea that I came from some type of royal lineage or whatever. Never even really told the story. He was just there for no reason. And I still have my accent, but at the time, my Yooper accent being from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I sounded like this ridiculous Canadian playing this role. And then I kind of borrowed a lot from Jim Cornette's, the early, really, really gaudy Pee Wee Herman looking, nothing matched. Everything I got was from a thrift store, and it was just instant heat as soon as I'd walk out in these clothes.
Very nice. Let's talk about the origin. As you see my background here, gotta talk IPW here. A very, very well storied history there. Where does that begin? Are you the founder of that? Talk about the rise, and then even what happened there. We're gone for a long time.
IPW has been around actually quite a while before me. My old buddy Mike Peskin, who used to wrestle for several years as Mike Incognito. He was Mr. Electricity, Mike Incognito. He did years of enhancement stuff with WWF when, you know, it wasn't called enhancement work. You're job guy or extras or whatever. He did that, I think, almost from the time he was 18 years old. And he started running shows up in the Northeast, specifically in Connecticut, Rhode Island type area. And it was very successful. He was always really good about knowing exactly who was just released or in between contracts in the WWF, when that just wasn't common knowledge. There was no internet. You might have been privy to, I won't even say the Observer was around back then. I mean, or Torch or anything else. He just knew people who knew people. So he'd run a show with locals, and on top you might have Dino Bravo against Davey Boy Smith, you know, stuff like that. And he ended up coming down to Florida in the mid 90s and was running very successful indies. And I'd always be pissed at him because I had a hard time getting on these shows. And I knew he paid well, and I knew he had, you know, back then, if you had one former WWF guy on the show, you had to be on that show. It just was unheard of. Down here, you didn't see a lot of that. Hercules and Jimmy Anvil Neidhart were a little good examples of that, and they were always based out of Tampa. Greg the Hammer Valentine, guys like that. But Mike had approached me. It was around '98, and had asked me if I'd be interested in booking for IPW. And I said, yeah, shit. We were running or working all these shows for Frankie Reyes over at Kahuna's in St. Pete, and just tearing the house down. Insane, crazy, violent shows with guys like Chaos, Southern Posse, and you had real great technical wrestlers when they were very, very young, like Mike Sullivan, Freedom Rider Mike Sullivan, Eddie Jackie, Pepe Prado, who also happens to be the brother-in-law of New York Yankees great Tino Martinez, Mike Marcello, who has since passed away. But I always had this feeling that no matter what Frankie and some others did for me, that I was really spinning my wheels. And if the crowd wasn't there, we got a shitty payday. The crowd was there, we got a shitty payday. And angles would just be started and stopped out of nowhere. There didn't seem to be continuity. There seemed to be a reluctance to stop pushing guys that were well past their prime, if they even ever had one. So I just said enough was enough, and Mike offered me the book. I immediately changed it to IPW Hardcore Wrestling, and I took everybody with me. And I really built a big part of everything around Chaos, as far as the hardcore side. And then as far as the holy shit technical guys, it was Buck Quartermain and Mike Sullivan and Navy SEAL, who unfortunately also just passed away last year. I was lucky enough to have guys like Pat Tanaka, Tommy Rogers, Marty Jannetty, and a host of others that were cool enough to not only come in for rates that were unheard of. I shot straight with them. They said, what I can get you, and it was never good. It was all I had. Not only would they do it, they'd come in and put my guys over. So you can look at years and years and years of results online of IPW Hardcore Wrestling, and then later NWA Florida, and you'll see a laundry list of guys that have come in and put my guys over, especially the Shane brothers, Mike Sullivan, and Jet Jaguar in the Cruiserweight division. I brought in everybody for those guys. And these guys would come in and put on these incredible matches, put my guys over, and back they went to their town. And we would return the favor if we went up north. And we did. You know, we did stuff with Jersey All Pro, Combat Zone. I had several wrestlers that were in the ECWA Super 8. Jeff Peterson was a huge part of us getting guys up there. And Jeff Peterson was probably one of the greatest stories of IPW. Unfortunately, one of the most tragic, too, as he passed away so young due to, you know, complications from lymphoma. But, yeah, we started out small but really, really hot. And I knew how to get the exposure with the local newspapers, local radio, local TV. They seem to be they seem to almost want something new, a change, some attitude. And we gave them all of that. We were in trouble a lot. Well, I was in trouble a lot, a real lot, and had to dance around every code and law you can think of, and really didn't care. They said we couldn't sell beer. That's cool. I'll just sell cups and I'll give you the beer away. You know what I mean? It was that type of thing. I still have a video up at the Crystal River National Guard Armory that I don't know what anybody was thinking, but it's like 2 or 3 tables stacked on top of each other on fire. And clearly right behind it, you can see a giant propane tank that says no open flame. And we're lucky we didn't blow Crystal River off the map. But we were so hot for a while. And we ran a show at the Pinellas Expo Center that legit was over 1,000 paid fans, which at the time, if you drew 100, people knew who you were. It was a tough time for wrestling. But we were some of the first to really make a mark on high spots where our VHS tapes, think how crazy that is, but our VHS tapes were in the top 10 on a regular basis because of a very new World Wrestling Network with Sal. We were one of the first DVDs on the shelves at Best Buy. It was Best of IPW, Hardcore Wrestling. And with alliances we had with Bobby Rogers and so forth, with the future of wrestling, we worked very closely with NWA Wildside, Bill Behrens, so that gave me access to the likes of AJ Styles, who was the IPW heavyweight champion for a while, Jimmy Rave, David Young, Blackout, you name it. Sal Renaro came in. I mean, it was like just a who's who. These guys would all pile into a car and they'd come down to St. Pete, Tampa, Crystal River, wherever we were at. And I got to make dream matches before their dream matches with guys like Scoot Andrews against Chris Daniels, AJ Styles against Roderick Strong, who, by the way, I beat in Words with Friends today. He did have a two-game winning streak. That's one thing I can beat him. I will not get into a chopping contest. I'm not going to challenge him to a sprint, but I will beat him publicly if I have to in Words with Friends. You can take that to the bank, Roderick. But I could ramble forever about IPW, man. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. I mean, the party was as important as anything else, and that was part of the image, but it was legit too. So, I mean, we always said the show was something that happened in between the pre and post party. And that was why a lot of the people like to come into town, was the madness, that they'd hear about. I had to have guys like Homicide and the Hit Squad and Trent Acid and Johnny Cashmere and all these guys come up from North, and they would just kill themselves in the ring for us. And man, you could just see the excitement for the party afterwards. And don't even get me started on guys like Teddy Hart. Surprised I was ever able to get him to leave, the time we had when he was here. But, that got a lot of people's attention. I'm not so sure that we would have had the success today that we had then, because I was a heat seeker, and for the people that got it, they loved me and they try to hook their cart to what we were doing because it meant opportunities around the world. But there was plenty that didn't love me, and my behavior was by no means the best. So with today's instant access to the internet and cameras and videos and this and that, there's no telling what would have happened. But I find it hard to believe that what was acceptable and cool then is not anymore.
It worked well, very well for the time, right?
Yeah. Well, and same with rock and roll and anything else. Yeah, I mean, some of these changes are for the better. I used to make fun of guys that would come into the dressing room with like chicken breasts, sitting down and reading or doing whatever. I mean, they were ribbed relentlessly. Some of them couldn't take it and they wouldn't come around. But you know what? These guys are healthier now. They're happier now. Some of the things I would like to see a little different, because I do think that wrestling is supposed to be the Old West, and there is supposed to be a certain amount of misfits and carnies and all this other stuff that comes with wrestling. But I do like the fact it's been cleaned up. I'm very happy that guys and girls are making money now on the indies. That's unheard of. You used to have a very, very small handful of guys, and I could name them all. You would know them. They were the only ones making money. Now I get approached by some kid, I don't even know who it is, and as they're talking to me, I'm looking up their info and checking them out, and they go right from asking about an opportunity to discussing rates. And I'm going, I guess that's the way it's done now, but it's so foreign to me that I think, unfortunately, for some of the younger talent, it costs them opportunities with old dudes like me, because it's just, I ain't saying you don't deserve to get paid. And I think it's professional that you want to know your rate. And I think it's great if you can demand a rate. You just can't do it with everybody, because the talent pool is so deep. And I don't have any money marks backing me. I'm not going to lose my family's money. And it ain't like the 90s where I could just keep taking out credit cards and just keep burning them to pay for TV time, rent, and everything else that goes with running a wrestling promotion. Because I think I'd even talk to you about it before, Jordan, where before when you had like, say a PWG show, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, best wrestling match or shows in the world as far as the modern style for several years now. Well, there was a time where there would be one show like that on a weekend that everybody would know for 2 months this show was coming up. It didn't matter where it was in the country. It was a big deal. Well, there's 25 of those every weekend now when we're back and running. You could see what Eric Canning is doing in the Midwest. You can see what PWG is doing on the West Coast. Joey Machete's promotion out there, PCW. I mean, they're running shows that I don't get, and I know Joey very well, but I joke with him and I talk to you about it. I mean, is everybody robbing banks and they just didn't smart so what's going on? Because truthfully, if I had a name or two, which usually we don't really need, but if I do it, that is a really big deal. And I'm going crazy trying to sell tickets, sell sponsors, do whatever, because if I don't, we're not going to meet payroll. So all these guys run shows where I'm doing basic math and going, okay, even if he's got favors, the trans is more than what I would even be willing to pay on payroll. So trans hotels and pay from top to bottom, there's, let's say 10 shows every Friday and 10 shows every Saturday that are legitimate all-star holy shit shows. And now you can't market it. DVDs don't sell. Yeah. Then everybody starts streaming. But why am I going to stream your show when I can watch a show just as good or better from another place for
so much for cheap too now? Yeah, DVD back in the day, you'd spend $20 for one DVD. Now you can spend $9.99 tops and get hours and hours.
You're right.
It's so much good stuff out there. Yeah, it's hard to compete.
Yeah, and I love this streaming. I just, like you said, it's like everything else. Everything becomes saturated, and as far as the talent. To be able to make a name for yourself right now, if you have the talent and the look and the ability, is so much easier. But man, is there competition out there. I mean, there is so much. When I first moved, I was gone for like 6 or 7 years to Georgia, and I moved back here. And at the time, I remember seeing, or shortly after, whatever, seeing guys like, I guess I might be screwing up the timeline here. Either way, when I first started seeing guys like Saeed Al-Sabah, who is just, there's so much talent in that kid's pinky. Snoop, I've already mentioned Troy and Hunter, and even guys that are gone now, Mitch Mitchell and Jeff Boone, they were so good. And I'm watching all these guys and I'm going, okay, the landscape has completely changed. It doesn't even resemble anything that it used to be. But I hate saying it, like Mitch, there's such a glut of talent and promotions, and it's, unless you're a guy like me, maybe more of a fellow worker type mentality, nobody even knows you're gone. You know what I mean? I've been doing this 28 years. I could vanish completely tomorrow, and I think you would understand this too, because I always say this: if guys like you and I didn't have the pencil, that phone stops ringing really quick. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that you meet. There's some of them may become lifetime friends, but trust me, when all of a sudden you're not running or booking shows, you realize really, really quick when you're in that role how unimportant you are, because everybody forgets. And if you start booking again tomorrow, they all come back. It's a very weird, incestuous business that it's almost like being put through a meat grinder and spit out the other end. Are you just willing to be put back in? And I have been for 20 years. And lots of great stuff, lots of fun, but lots of horror stories and sadness as well along the way. I'm always happy to share I don't like to say knowledge, but knowledge. I like to share it with people that want to listen. And there's been a handful since I've been back. And I wish, best example I can give is Saeed. Me and him seem to really kind of like hit on a really cool wavelength as far as just from two guys who have nothing in common at all, come from totally different places, different age, different race, different everything. If I'd have met him 20 years before, I would have dismissed him as being some artsy fartsy, completely out there in outer space guy before I'd ever given him an opportunity to see what he could do in the ring. And don't even get me started on Treehouse, because he makes Saeed look completely
Yeah,
normal.
he's the sane one. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I've met these guys and I'm like, I'm a little bit more open-minded to, everybody doesn't have to be a complete primitive animal and savage walking on the cave every morning. And that's what I've always kind of insisted on. And, opening up my mind and a lot of times hard, to be able to get to know some of these kids and realize how talented they were. But that still doesn't mean that they're always going to take my advice. And it also don't mean that a lot of times I haven't tuned them out when I feel they're, going in the wrong direction and there's nothing I'm going to do to change it. It's tough because Saeed had an opportunity to evolve and I thought was killing it, but just was not at all getting along with Gabe, which don't surprise me, as I've never gotten along with Gabe either for 20 something years now. Never will. And like me, Saeed voiced his opinion rather strongly and he was gone 2 minutes later. If I had been able to play damage control with that wouldn't have happened. And maybe I'd have been able to say something that would have changed it. But I'm not a hypocrite. It was less than a year later that I was far more aggressive on my way out the door. And I don't regret it at all. I miss the guys there. I miss Boom a lot. I love that venue. And I love going up to, I say Detroit, but the show's actually in Livonia when they're in Michigan. Kind of like I miss the restaurants and food and the people and this and that. But I hated that hostile work environment. It was the worst ever, and I wouldn't wish it upon my.
Can you speak on it? What happened here? I was really enjoying you and Lenny on commentary here, and I thought you were great feeding off him. And what happened there? It was going for about a year or so, or if not longer.
It was about this time last year, a couple months after WrestleMania last year. I was never ever. I'm good at taking direction, and I was in the military 8 years, and I was an enlisted guy, so I'm used to taking orders. But I'm also used to when you're chopped down to nothing, like you are in basic training. The entire reason for that is for them to then build you up in the model of what they want, and they're giving you, no matter how rough they are, they're giving you constructive criticism, and that was never the case there. It was somebody that would never, whether in wrestling or work or on the street, that would never talk to me like that to my face, would just be vicious, really, really heavy duty disrespect and contempt and, just unexplainable rage. But, if I was a complete nerd that, didn't have anything much really going on other than wrestling, yeah, I'd probably be pissed off at the world too, and it's one of those things you find in wrestling a lot of times, that the guys that aren't the cool kids, like the wrestlers on the show, and they somehow find themselves in a position of power over the cool kids. They like to make up for years and years and years of abuse and being picked on. And I'm sure they would use the term bully, and then they turn around and bully themselves. And I'm just not that guy to eat that kind of shit. I'm not. And, truthfully, I'm 50 years old now on top of it. And there wasn't enough money. And the carrot that's dangled in front of everybody's face, hey, man, if you behave here and you can get over, you're going to go to NXT. Pretty hard to argue with that, unless you're a 5'6", 50-year-old wrestling manager that sounds like he eats gravel every day before he commentates. I'm not going to WWE. They don't want me. If they did, they would have had me years and years ago. I even had a stint in Deep South for almost a year where I was calling matches with Matt Stryker and Nigel Sherrod and some of these other guys, where they were hearing my stuff every week, and it didn't stink enough to tell me to beat it. Same as Evolve, Shine, FIP, ACW. They never told me to hit the road. And if they didn't like my stuff, I guarantee they would have. But again, it is, I'm not an underwear model. At least I'm not anymore.
What?
No, not anymore. I quit. My age caught up with me. But that's what they're looking for. They're looking for models with perfect teeth and perfect condition with the perfect voice. And that's not me. And there's commentators. Let's put it this way. If Lenny isn't with the WWE, I'm not going. It ain't happening. He is the best play-by-play guy in the business. And they know him. They love him.
True.
Everybody knows
He's been
Niemi.
there since day one of Evolve. Yeah, that's true. If they wanted him, they'd have him. Yeah.
And shit, go back to Ring of Honor. Some of the
Yeah.
greatest Ring of Honor matches in history are called by Lenny. And he was carrying some guys that had no business sitting next to him. And it was that way with Evolve as well until I came in. Me and Lenny hit on all cylinders. He's so ridiculously prepared. And if I'm allowed to do my thing, which again, I wasn't, as far as freedom, listen to me on FIP or ACW and then listen to me on Evolve. Two totally different guys because we're supposed to think that Evolve fans are so advanced and so serious and they get wrestling at a different level that for some reason they're not want to hear comedy at all. They're not going to want to hear any history. They're not going to want to hear anything. Basically be a robot and sit there and do what is in my head. I want, there is no monitors. There is no fucking headsets. It's Bush League. The goddamn thing, a big top flea market with Dave in Tampa Bay Pro. I watched you guys. You were better equipped there, in a fucking flea market than I am sitting in La Boom in Queens, New York, where the crowd would be going so goddamn crazy at times there in Philly and these other places. Me and Lenny are fucking risking life and limb to stand on top of tables so we can see over the crowd, and then we're getting screamed at because we missed some spot. Get some monitors. Nobody will miss anything, you cheap son of a bitch. You can't stick it all in your pocket and then blame the talent or blame anything else. Technological wise, me and you are more technically equipped right now than the commentators are given equipment there. I dare you to give them an earpiece. I remember the day that the referees were given earpieces. They were being handed out like they were chunks of goddamn gold. They've been using those on the shittiest of shit shows. So, I mean, it was, the talent level when I was there, I think was at an all-time high. And right as I'm leaving, it was very clear that the top guys were not getting replaced by top guys. The fly-ins were not getting replaced by fly-ins. So the costs were being cut down to nothing. And it really was being turned into a seminar promotion that happened to run wrestling shows. They don't care about you buying a ticket. They want you to buy a spot at the seminar. They don't care if you can wrestle. Still pay for the seminar. That's what it's all about right now. And the WWE is in on it, and they're all getting paid. So what do I know? Me and you are sitting here talking to each other on a Sunday. We're not running seminars that make you $30,000.
No, that is true at the moment. That is very true here. No, great stuff, man. I want to go back to IPW here. You guys are running, as you said. The fans are crazy. They loved it. I was aware. I was a fan, looking at the DVDs as well. Well, what happened? You guys were gone by the time I came in about a decade ago. You guys were gone for a long time.
Yeah, it was really kind of what I alluded to, where there was not enough revenue to go against the expenses. We had the WrestlePlex was not a small expense. The TV was very expensive, and we were paying for the time and hoping to at least break even on advertising. But I had a bunch of misfits working for me that they wouldn't drive across town to pick up flyers, but they would travel 50 miles to pick up a bag of weed. I mean, that was the problem is the ones that were closest to me that I could trust, I couldn't trust at all. And then I made a really big mistake also going with what we were talking about earlier. There was a biker festival thing that was supposed to be happening in Ybor City. And I was talked into being part of it and running an IPW show. And I was led to believe there was going to be tens of thousands of people pushing six figures, up and down 7th Avenue in Ybor, almost like Guavaween used to be back in the day. So I bring this show in, book Abdullah the Butcher, Kevin Sullivan, Norman Smiley, and the list goes on and on. Nobody shows up. And I mean nobody. If there was 5 people, and then being an idiot, I ran anyway. And Sal was running over in St. Pete. We were bitter, horrible enemies, FIP and IPW at the time.
That's gonna be my next question is the FIP IPW wars.
Yeah, it was brutal, dude. And he ran that night over in St. Pete with Balls Mahoney and New Jack and a host of others. Free beer, free tickets, and my dumb ass running a show in Ybor. I get to the venue, can't even figure out where the show's going to be, which again is my fault. I should have had all that handled way ahead of time, but we're stuck in some warehouse kind of like behind everything. But even if we were right smack dab out front, nobody came to this festival. It was like the worst promoted deal in history. So we took a bath. I really couldn't get out of it. I borrowed all kinds of money from all kinds of people on the spot, paid everybody that I had to, pulled the plug that night. That was it for IPW. All in one swoop. That was it. I just gave up. Literally didn't even go get the rings from the WrestlePlex. Didn't get the belts back from the guys. I just said, that's it. I quit. I can't take it. And I've never quit nothing in my life. And that was the end. It really wasn't much longer that Joe Price then came along with NWA Florida, asked me to book it. And next thing you know, IPW Hardcore Wrestling is clearly NWA Florida. It was like I pressed a button and kicked out all the dummies and brought my crew in. And next thing you know, we're associated with the NWA. And the good thing is most people running that had a NWA membership didn't know what to do with it. Well, I went crazy with it. And next thing you know, we got Jarrell Clark as the NWA World Champ. The Shane brothers got the NWA World Tag Belts under Howard Brody. The Heavenly Bodies, the new Heavenly Bodies, Chris Nelson and Vito DiNucci, managed by Jimmy Del Rey, they had the NWA World Tag Belts. So we made a lot of noise, but one of the hottest things when IPW was like on fire was the feud between FIP and IPW, and it was never a feud that ever happened in the ring. It was all behind the scenes. It was all very nasty. Several fights, several invasions of each other's shows, cops, fire marshals. I'm surprised the National Guard never got involved. But, Sal was a very passionate person, and I was, well, we both still are. And I think he had a lot of people influencing him the wrong way. Would, hey, Ron said this or this guy did that, or led to believe there was things going on that weren't. So he ended up with a place that was called the Arena, which was a really cool warehousey type boxing gym that was literally across the highway you could get from the WrestlePlex to there in 2 minutes. So then he starts running, and they had a beer license, so they're giving away free beer and bringing in far more names than I were. And then, of course, like any other wrestling deal, I found out really quick the loyalty. Guys would rather, well, hey, man, if I work here why can't I work there later? Well, you're right. Why would anybody come and see you here if they could see you there? I said, I'm not doing the old you can't work there routine, which I did actually, but that wasn't the meaning behind it. It was, if I'm a ticket buyer, why in the fuck do I care about going to see you at this show if I could see you at that show for free with free beer and with names? Then when they're dead and buried 6 months from now, you'll be motherfucking me. Wonder why you're not on my show. So there was a lot of that, but lots of violence involved. Again, today, very few of the wrestlers that are around now would have made it through that. But, me and Sal ended up very good friends. I still consider him a good friend. He's a former Marine. He's a family man. He lost his wife when the kids were really young, and he raised them on their own, and he's got all the respect in the world from me. I do wish he would pop Gabe in the nose for me at least one time. That kind of pisses me off, but you know what? They make money together, so I can't fault them for that.
I was in Steak and Shake with Gabe recently. You should have told me.
Oh my God. And it's funny because Sal is one of those guys that a lot of the time during that stuff we had going on with each other, I think a lot of the boys had this misinterpretation that Sal was this fucking pussy that came from this rich family, and he literally the opposite. His dad just grinded to work his ass off as a small business owner, and Sal was an enlisted Marine. And just the total opposite of what everybody thought. And that guy, he's tough, dude. He's tough as nails. He's relentless, and he's persistent. I do believe unless the bottom completely falls out on the WWE, which it's not going to, I do believe you'll be watching Evolve on the WWE network. Maybe Progress, I don't know. They kind of don't seem to have the legs they did. But I think you'll see Evolve on there, so maybe we will see Lenny after all. And if the library shows up on there, I guess we'll even get to see me. That'd be nice.
Hey, you on the WWE network.
You know what, man? It's one of those things that, don't think for 1 minute that I wouldn't be thrilled to be able to have my kids see me on there, even just once.
Sure.
Man. You know, all my kids have grown up around this business, and Hunter is he's 14 now, but you know, he was ringing the bell at the Evolve shows at God, I can't think of Jerry's club, the Orpheum in Ybor City. You know, he's ringing the bell for matches with Ricochet and Johnny Gargano and you name it, dude. Matt Riddle, Drew Galloway, you know, all of them. So he's sitting there, you know, and I've never, to this day, I've never smartened up any of my kids about wrestling. I never smartened them up about Santa, Easter Bunny. They just kind of find out when it's ready. Who knows? Maybe they're clinically insane and they still believe all this stuff. But, you know, Hunter would sit there and he never knew when the finish was, and he wasn't allowed to hit the bell until I'd hit him on the knee. It'd be me, Lenny, and Hunter. And, he would be just hanging on the edge of his seat because you know the false finishes when it comes to that type of style. So, you know, this kid has memories of not only seeing these guys come up in the business, he was part of it. You know what I mean? And there's nothing better. So if he was able to watch me on there, I don't know what it would mean to him, but it mean a lot to me. You know, and I've fought and I've done everything I can to earn it. I got to appear on TNA. I got to appear on WCW. I never did nothing with ECW, which still to this day blows my mind. I was a perfect fit for that in every sense of the word. I'd also be dead, so that's probably a good thing that I wasn't there.
The silver lining.
I wouldn't have made it through. I would have been thrilled, but I would never have survived. But I always thought that's why I'd end up when, you know, the entire reason for IPW, I've never considered myself a promoter, and I still don't. I do consider myself a good booker and handling talent. But the only reason I ran shows is because I got sick of being on such bad shows. So the idea was I'm going to use the platforms that I know, like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, The Observer, The Torch, very early on, AOL Instant, AOL Messenger boards, shit like that. People were talking about IPW along the same lines as the majors because I knew how to use that stuff to my advantage. As a matter of fact, that's where I met Chris Hero and Jeff Peterson. They were just high school kids. And me and Chris Hero talk about it to this day when I see him. He was this young kid asking me what school he should go to, and I threw out a couple of recommendations, and he ended up at Dory Funk's, which wasn't one of my recommendations. But, man, Chris Hero, the fact that WWE got rid of him is so insane. But, man, what a gift to the independent and the international scene, man.
Yeah, we'll welcome him with full arms, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to his next run.
Oh, he's so great. And, he was in the Peterson Cup later for us, along with, I don't know if you've ever had a chance to look at the lineup of the Peterson Cup every year.
I have that DVD in this house somewhere. Oh, I know.
Crazy. Just totally crazy. I mean, it was unbelievable. And that's how I got to know a lot of these guys that are stars now, is they would always be happy to come down. And it wasn't, I don't think it was for respect for me or later for Sal, who ran things. It was just Jeff. Everybody loved Jeff. If they didn't know him because they were too young, they knew somebody who knew him. His reputation still goes today.
Let's talk about that for those that aren't informed. And I'm even curious myself because I know about the tournament. It is a very prestigious tournament that lasted several years there in Florida. As you said, each year had just some of the top talent in the country, sometimes even the world. Tell us about Jeff Peterson. What is the story with Jeff? I never knew him. I knew him just from the cup, really. And so tell us about Jeff Peterson himself.
He was the nephew of the owner of ECWA, Jim Kettner, who was the promotion that started the Super 8, which is, considered still to this day as far as kind of the grandfather of the like all the different versions of basically is what is the best of the Super Juniors from Japan, borrowed and brought over here. King of the Indies with Roland Alexander and everybody out on the West Coast. But Jeff had moved down here with his parents, and he had told me when he was coming online, and I would get pictures of this skinny little, kid. And at the time, I pushed Naftali, which later became Milo Beasley, that everybody knows here in Florida. And he was very, very thin and not your prototypical wrestler that people think of when they think of pro wrestlers. So he came down and he would start coming to the school. And I mean, to say this kid was gifted and light years ahead of everybody else was an understatement. He could just go. And he was a natural baby face, but even if we had spot shows that kind of like weren't, it didn't matter what we did on a few of these spot shows that like our normal fans weren't there. They were kind of like paid shows. We did some at these different bars and pubs and whatever, where I would use Jeff as a heel on these shows, and he would get molten white hot heat way more than anybody else, and he just fit right into it. But then as soon as the match was over, he was back to being the nicest guy in the world, and he was just tearing it up. He would go back and forth. He would go work his uncle's shows in Delaware for the ECWA once a month, and then he was living here and working every one of my shows and working out at the school. And he really helped put our cruiserweight situation on the map when I did a forklift ladder match with him and Jet Jaguar and Mike Quackenbush at the Crystal River National Guard Armory. And the only reason the forklift was put in there is because I would see this big military industrial size forklift that would be there every single time we'd go. And I finally approached the sergeant that was running the place, and I said, can we please use that in a match? And he was cool about it. So, you know, these guys got the forks were all the way up in the air. There's still I think there's stuff online about it. I know there's pictures, and these guys are jumping off of there and using a ladder. And Quackenbush was like, he was, even back then, was like he came from some wrestling planet that nobody knew about, because he was working this wacky, weird hybrid, like it would be like a catch-as-catch-can, lucha, Japanese, just hybrid mix of, you know, like, what are you doing, Mike? I mean, I don't understand this. But Jeff Peterson and Jet Jaguar, I mean, it was just like these guys, just everybody mixed and meshed together, and we were off and running at that point. And Jeff was really starting to catch some fire, and unfortunately came down with a form of lymphoma. And Jeff was really, for his age, he was really eccentric and different and this and that. So I hate it, but I want to say that almost for a while you didn't know. I mean, is this some elaborate work, or, you know, what's happening here? He's only 20. He looks like a high school kid, 20, 21. And it wasn't long after that we ended up losing him. And it was it was legitimately a tragedy. It really was. There's the match right there. Yeah, go check it out on the IPW page, IPW Hardcore Wrestling page on YouTube. Jet Jaguar is in a hell of a job with that whole page. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of IPW wrestling on there.
Definitely, yeah. I'm subscribed, as you can see.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. We used to pack them in Crystal River too. We had some insane shows up there. We actually did pretty good at the gate on those as well for the time. So unfortunately, we lost Jeff, and then Naftali, who I mentioned, in Milo Beasley, he came up with the idea of the Jeff Peterson Memorial Cup, which was going to be a two-day 16-man tournament, you know, to crown a champion. And we started reaching out, and it was just everybody wanted to be part of it. You know, from CM Punk to Colt Cabana to, I mean, you name it, dude. Everybody. The last 4 or 5 years, I didn't have much of a hand in it because I wasn't living here. And honestly, the stress of real world and how seriously I took that every time. And I'd be lying. You could find other interviews of me out there where I was so mad at Florida every single year because it was during the tough drawing days, and we just wouldn't get huge crowds for the Peterson Cup. And it wasn't just that the people didn't come and buy tickets. The goddamn workers that were not part of the show, they would not fucking come. They just wouldn't do it. Yeah, I mean, I could have begged them, which I wasn't going to do. It was like that lame indie mentality of, well, if I'm not part of it, I'm not going to support it, you know, and they wouldn't come. I think it was the Peterson Cup too. The finals of that had a big crowd. And that was with Chris Sabin. I think it was Chris Sabin and Sanjay Dutt in the finals. You know, and it had guys like Alex Shelley, Delirious. I mean, it was just sick. And again, Sanjay and Sabin and Shelley and Delirious and those guys at the time, you know, the fans in Brandon, Florida, I mean, they literally didn't know what the fuck was happening in front of their eyes. You You know what I'm saying? They had never seen nothing like this. And neither did I, but I looked like a goddamn genius putting it together. Yeah, man. And guys like TJ Wilson came in, Jack Evans, Teddy Hart. The list goes on and on. I mean, we even had Milano Collection AT, and he won it one year. You had a young John Moxley, Sammy Callahan, just on and on. It's, again, 16 guys every year for 10 years. Pretty hard to remember 160 guys. I don't remember anybody coming in and just being a bust, though. You know, not every match was perfect. That's
What about Kendo Kashin?
Oh, man. You know, he was the only guy that I remember that we had booked that I kicked off. It wasn't that – I think there were others that had injuries and stuff that couldn't make it, but he was booked, and I knew about him just by reading about him and his history. I think I was just more excited about the idea. They could have offered me any name from Japan that if he had any name value, I would take him. So it was Simon Inoki, and I can't remember who it was through, but they had booked him for it. And I'm thinking, like, kind of how I mentioned earlier, everyone knew the deal. And next thing you know, there's these travel demands and hotel demands, and this is what he needs to get paid. And I even want to say there was an issue as far as who would be going over or under. And I'm like, you know, to this day, why would I give a shit about anything that Simon Inoki or anybody else has to say? I'm pretty sure Antonio Inoki could have been telling me through an interpreter, and I wouldn't care. So for his son-in-law to be telling me about a guy that truthfully had no value whatsoever other than to me, because I like to present the idea that this was, you know, wrestling smoke and mirrors, man. I mean, if I could have had somebody every year that was a true lucha star from Mexico, one that was a true name from Japan and England, don't think for 1 minute that there wouldn't have been those slots, you know, allocated every year. But as soon as they started putting demands, I told them to go fuck themselves. And needless to say, I never did business with Simon again. And that was
I'm not surprised. I feel like he did the same thing to Ring of Honor, as far as not wanting to go over, or wanting to go over and giving demands.
Yeah, it's a work, man. Yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand, you know, protecting your image and your persona, but it isn't exactly like he's the ace of New Japan Pro Wrestling or Noah or All Japan where the office is going. No, it's not happening. Forget it. You know, we had a little bit like that with when we brought in Ultimo Dragon last year for that show at the Hardy County Fair. I've always been a fan of his work and always been a huge fan of his look and his ability to everybody always remembers the pictures with him with those 8 or 9 belts, you know what I mean, just covering his body and everything. And, you know, the impact he had with Dragon Gate, Toryumon, I think it's Toryumon X. You know, this guy's running schools and promotions in Mexico and Japan and is a worldwide star in WCW as well. I'm going, you know, wow, I can get him. And what a giant pain in the ass this guy was. And I'd never use him again. And he don't care. He don't need my money. He can get it anywhere. Everyone loves him. But it was a match that should never have been booked. Certain people wanted to be in the match that should have known they didn't belong in that match because the styles are just styles clashing. And I allowed it, and it was a train wreck. They didn't get along. And I left before everything was cleaned up and handled, which I never do. And that was pretty much with one saying they're going to punch him in the face and the other one saying he's going to shoot him. And I'm like, okay, time to go. Fuck you guys. And that was it for that. Yeah, there we go. What a train wreck. And here I am at ringside wishing I was anywhere other than there. Yeah. Jesus. Sam was great. It was just like everything was off. We really misjudged everything. We got the Hardy County Fair. When I tell you 100% of the fans in the building are Hispanic, I'm not exaggerating. Everybody, it's all migrant farmers. And I knew that back from old shows I used to do in Huachula way back in the day. So I knew that, okay, we're going to be catering to a Lucha Libre fan base. So we bring him in. We bring in Ray Fury, Jay Rios and his partner doing it was a Serpentico, and forget Jay's gimmick.
Well, yeah, he's changed a couple of times. Rios
Yeah.
Badu, he's changed Oraculo.
Yeah, Oraculo. We brought in
Okay.
Serpentico and Oraculo, and love those guys.
Yeah.
For how much I like them, it's kind of criminal. We've probably have only been on like 20-something shows together, and I brought them in, and nobody cared about any of the luchadors, and then out comes James Carver from Kentucky, in this ridiculous indie like flag mask, calling himself Mr. USA and waving a flag. And the place comes unglued like Hulk Hogan walking into Madison Square Garden. And I'm sitting back there like if I was on a cartoon, it would like a giant question mark above my head. I could, and he had a match that was punch kick. Wasn't good, wasn't bad, wasn't anything. You would have thought it was Hulk beating the Iron Sheik in Madison Square Garden. The place is going bonkers. Ultimo Dragon comes out later in the show, and you could have heard a pin drop across the fairgrounds. Nobody cared. Thank God they didn't care because he mailed it in, shit the bed, didn't care. Dirty Blondes and Slambinos and Sam are out there doing everything in their power to put on an entertaining match, and it just wasn't happening. But yeah, that was my fault. I don't know. I mean, it just kind of seemed like basic demographic type booking. George Rodriguez, I don't know if you know Big George. He was on the show, and he's a local, and he was the only, I guess he ain't a luchador, but you know what I'm saying, that it was in the luchador type character role. And, everyone loved him, but that was more of the hometown hero than it was like a nationalistic type response. It's live and learn. The next show we ran there was a year later. It was only a couple months ago. And we didn't care about any of that, and still had a hell of a crowd. It was freezing goddamn cold out there. But, saving, let's say, Ultimo Dragon not being on the card is the difference of about $3,000 between payroll, flights, hotels, treating him like a king while he's on here to then get shit on, is one of those type of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes the price isn't equal to what you get. Sometimes there.
And the fans were going to be there either way. Again, I mean, I've been doing this, but they wanted a marquee name. And and I'm not that guy. I'm not going to collect that type of money, and then I don't want to shit on anybody here. I don't want to get that kind of money and then put some whoever out there. I mean, some nobody that. To them are nobodies. Me and you might, hey, it's a great talent.
Yeah,
well, he's not
a name. Yeah.
So, I did the right thing. This year they tried the same thing, and it was like I just bumped the price up to where I knew they would lose interest on it. And I presented a really strong, local and Georgia indie talent. And people liked it even more. It was over. If they weren't dying of, I want to say it was like 30 degrees that night. What was really cool that stood out to me on that show, I've never, ever been a supporter of women wrestling. I really don't like it. And that bias has kind of influenced my booking. But I had Lexi Gomez on there against Kelsey from the WWN school, who was actually having her debut match, and they killed it. They had such a good match. Nice. They worked so hard. The crowd absolutely loved it. I mean, it was the highlight of the show, and I'm going, okay. I mean, I learned one year that booking it based on nothing but ethnic demographic was a complete mistake, and then going against my better judgment and putting a girls match with, Lexi's pretty green, but she's been around a while. Kelsey was less than green, and it wasn't a match I booked. It actually changed 3 different times. So I was already hot that I kind of like being told, hey, we got to do this. Okay, well, I'll go with it. And it gets booked as one thing. It gets changed. And then the day before the show, I find out that that's changed, and I'm getting a girl who's never wrestled before. So I'm on fire.
I see the trepidation, yeah.
Well, don't make me do something I don't want to do and then keep changing it to where it gets worse. But then the girls go out there. If I was running a show with you tomorrow, I'd say, hey, let's put those 2 on. It'll get over. And
absolutely. Lexi's the current World Pro champion, so yeah, no, I'm a fan.
Is she good, man? She's got, she's one of those. I think technically she's got it from like where she's at time in the business wise.
Absolutely.
appearance is fantastic, but good attitude. It's one of those things. I always have this opinion, and again, it's because I'm from a different time. If some other male wrestler doesn't get in there and screw the whole thing up for her, and I hope that she's smart enough to not let that happen, I think she's got a chance. I really do.
Absolutely.
I think it'll take a long time. She has such a baby face, which is to her advantage. But it's one of those things, again, I always try to look at something like WWE or AEW, whatever, and I can't think of anybody who, like, her look there is nobody there with her look. I could see them giving opportunity, but I think it's a ways from now. Hey, but look at Fabu and Tony were Tony Donati and Fabu Andre were just on AEW a few weeks ago, and I tell you, that's Chris Silvio pulling the strings and making things happen. Me and Chris have never really done much together, but if there's anybody that's trying to better and help the independent scene and the independent wrestlers, it's him. I'm telling you. And I think that his influence, look at that. How awesome is that, dude? When I saw that online, I had nobody had called me. Fabu is really good about kind of keeping information close to his vest, which it goes a long way. But normally I would have been kind of a little, hey, man, give me the heads up. I can help push this thing. But, man, that was a nice surprise. I was sitting at work, and I'm a Facebook junkie, and I'm going through, and all of a sudden this pops up. I'm like, holy shit. Fabu, you want to talk about somebody that pays his dues? Did you ever hear the story of when he went to Japan? Him and his mom went over there, and I had connected him with a friend of mine that I figured would at least show him around and maybe get his foot in the door to at least talk to some people. I never figured a show. I wanted to get him to be able to at least visit some dojos and roll around and do whatever. Well, to say this kid took the opportunity and made the most of it. Him and his mom went there, and I think his mom plays some type of game online with this lady from Japan, and they had become friends. So when Fabu and his mom went over there, they stayed, it's like the guest quarters at some convent, not a bunch of nuns. Like I think it's a convent that services like a hospice or something like that. But they got a guest quarters there, and Fabu and his mom were crashing there while he was, doing his thing. And of course, mom was able to do some tourist stuff. And I'd hooked up Fabu with my buddy Ruji, who then introduced him to Minoru Suzuki, and he got to do. Did you ever see the pictures of that show he did where it's what's the name? Chris Brooks is over there right now doing stuff with the same promotion. I can't remember the name, but it's this small, tiny females promotion where it's one of those deals where they got the mat on the floor, but they don't have the ropes and that. Have you ever seen any of those before?
I thought I saw some photos of it. Yeah, on his page.
Yeah, they like do a singing and dancing number somewhere in the show, and then at another.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and then they take a break, and they're all sitting down eating soup with the fans. Like it is the most kooky, weird deal. But later on, if you look, Fabu I think has got pictures and videos of it on there. But then during the same trip, he then left and went to Italy to do some stuff with that promotion. I think it's called SIW that Chris Silvio is associated with over in Italy. So then Fabu got work over there and got to be in their seminars and training, and then back to Japan he went. And I'm going, man, this is the kind of guy that makes it, dude. You know what I mean? That's when you're willing to make those type of sacrifices, and you're willing to, if you've got connections that are put together. Yeah, there you go. Is that great? I forget what the name of the promotion is. I had posted it at one time, but it's that Gato move. You see the hashtag there?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's the name of it. And this lady runs it, and there's another picture or two from a different angle where you could see the window, I think, which is going into the kitchen where they're making their soup. Yeah, you see how they got the
canvas? Oh, wow.
Yeah, and everybody's sitting like right at the edge of that canvas, and they just wrestle on that. But yeah, Chris Brooks, who's like an indie superstar with DDT and all that now, he works those shows too. But yeah, what a cool experience. But you gotta have balls to go and do something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Definitely.
hey man, I'm gonna give you an opportunity. You're gonna wrestle in front of 32 people who are gonna be. It's gonna be like you're in a living room and there's gonna be a canvas laid out and you're gonna act like it's a ring, and the people are literally gonna be sitting on top of you. But first, I need you to sing and dance in this choreographed number, and in between, we're gonna have you enjoy soup with the fans. I'd be like, you know, I would imagine you're like supposed to take a hit of acid before all of this happens.
Just when I thought I knew enough about wrestling, it still
Yeah.
somehow surprises me.
Read up on that promotion, dude. It's pretty interesting. I had spent a lot of time reading it, but my memory these days is pretty fried. So
And
I
yeah,
can't.
no, just big shout out to Fabu, man. I've known him when he was a fan actually in Venice. He came to a couple of shows and like was just picking my brain, and I just really drive, and I'm not surprised that when he went to Japan, he found an opportunity, and that's what he keeps doing. And good dude, keeps
Yeah,
learning, getting better. And he fought John Moxley 2 weeks ago. How crazy is that?
I thought he looked good too, and I thought Tony the following week, who was given a lot more than what I would have guessed, in going into that match, he had a good competitive match, and again, in front of nobody, with no, you got no heat or anything to basically feed off of. It's got to be nerve wracking.
Yeah, a whole
And
different thing to get used to.
yeah,
Sure.
and they both look like stars. There's again, I'm a big proponent of I do understand that again the game has changed and the old wrestling is for everyone crap that's out there. Uh, you're in Florida and the sun is out there every day, even in the winter. Use the sun. If you're not going to go to the gym and lift, then go out and run or walk, do whatever. But be marketable and be in shape and do what you got to do to be noticed. Uh, Again, the days of like some of the names I mentioned earlier, the Abdullah the Butchers and Jerry Blackwells and this and that, they're not out there. Even the monsters, they're freaks. They look like they were created in a lab somewhere. And, the days of not being, in condition and able to go, even if it's not just cosmetically, being able to go and not blowing up. If you go to the performance center, if they invite you there, all they're going to try to do is blow you up the entire time you're there. The WWN seminars, that was a big part of it too, depending on who was handling the training. Back in the day, at the power plant with WCW, is almost torturous with Sarge and those guys with Jody Hamilton and all that were putting guys through. It's just one of those things. And you know what? It's no different than any other sport, football or anything else. It's brutal. So if you're not going to be in that condition and you're waiting for the phone to ring, what happens when it rings and you can't go do what is, what's expected of you? And I do believe, again, I like a good mix. I've always loved the complete, animals and the one-man gang types and all those guys. I loved, actually got to work with them. When one of the times that me and the Shane brothers went to Puerto Rico for the World Wrestling Council, we got to work with the Reggaetones, which was the babyface version of the Headhunters, and they were managed by Joe Don Smith, and they both look like two little Abdullah the Butchers, the twin
Yeah.
brothers. You know who they are. And I was glad that we were the heels, they were the faces, and they weren't doing the blood and guts stuff then. They were singing and dancing, and Joe Don Smith would be rapping and stuff, and it was fun. But these guys could, for how crazy they looked, and they'd go out there and stab each other to death. But at the same regard, they could do moonsaults off the top and freakish athletic stuff. They were my height and like 300 and something pounds, or at least looked like they were. But they could do things other people couldn't do. But even then, unless you were watching international wrestling or indies, you weren't going to see them get a break here. It just wasn't going to
They
happen.
were in the Royal Rumble '96.
You know what? I don't remember that. What were they as? Was it the Headhunters?
I think it's literally their only appearance. The squad team, maybe they come in and they're
Okay.
out like real quick.
I'm gonna look that up later. I didn't know that. That's pretty cool. When
Uh,
I first started seeing when WWF got the slot from Southwest Championship Wrestling on USA Network, they would show like specials from the Spectrum and Madison Square Garden to Boston Garden. I can't remember. It would almost be like once a month. Maybe they were doing it for once a month before Southwest got booted, and then they took over. But at the time, the WWF was a member of the NWA. And I don't know if you remember in the old days when you would have the magazines like Pro Wrestling Illustrated, they would list the NWA as world champ, EWA as world champ, WWF is heavyweight champ. The reason they would do that is because they were NWA members. Yeah, I mean, they didn't do anything with the title, but that was their world championship because they were a member of the NWA. So theirs was called the heavyweight. But you would get underneath on these shows, Harley Race while he was the world champ, like mid-card. Underneath, you would see the Invaders, Carlos Colon. It would just like where you, before Vince slammed the door shut, a lot of people forgot, or they're not old enough to know and never researched that. They really had a cool open door where they would bring in talent as special guests. Dusty would come in as well, and he'd come in and bleed buckets, and he was a special attraction and make a shit ton of money, sell out the house and gone, and maybe bring him back the next year. The AWA used to do that with Andre the Giant. They used to do like this Battle Royal series every winter. I think it would probably be one loop, of the house shows, but they ran from fucking Green Bay to Minneapolis all the way out to Denver and everywhere in between. And Andre would come in and win the Battle Royal in every single city, and off he would go, and you wouldn't see him again for another year, And I think he was booked through Vince's office at the time. But yeah, I'm sorry, I go off on sidetracks, man.
No, not at all. It's cool to know, man. A little bit tidbits I would know, but other stuff like that, I wasn't too aware of. So that's awesome. One thing I definitely want to pick your brain on here is, you've had a long standing in Florida wrestling here. Who do you think are some of the Florida stars that were kind of passed on? You named some names here that I was a huge fan of that, like, if nowadays would probably be in NXT. These things are so differently. Who do you think never really got the right shake?
Without a doubt, Scoot Andrews, Mike Sullivan, and Buck Quarterman. I mean,
sure, man. I love Scoot Andrews, man. Black Nature boy, come on.
Everybody does. I mean, I want to say it was only like 2 weeks ago, Eddie Kingston was posting on Twitter asking if people could send him matches on Scoot Andrews. I'm not even sure why, but it was pretty cool to see.
Just want to watch Scoot Andrews matches.
I leave Billy Fives out of that because, truthfully, I don't think Billy ever really wanted to go. He's never been this guy that, hey, I love wrestling. Yeah, I mean, he's ultra talented, and sure. I was lucky to have him and had him as my champ for a while. And he was just never the love it at all costs guy. And he was not the kind of guy to put up with the kind of shit that you'd have to put up with to go to that level and stay there. I mean, Mike Sullivan, I think I was just talking about on my Facebook page last week, he wrestled Loki at Madison Square Garden for the WWE. Yeah, that's it. He's gone. I'm ready to throw a ticker tape parade or, going away party. That's clearly a match that you're looking at two of the top guys on the indies, seeing what they got at the arena. Yeah, I mean, fucking Madison Square Garden, and nothing came out of it. And again, Mike now would be a very big guy on the indies as far as size, the way everything. He's a real guy, real man, real athlete. They missed the boat on him. Scoot was a different level altogether than everybody. And, I brought Scoot back, I think once a year for the past few years. But last year, actually coming up on 2 years ago now, when I brought him back and put him with Austin Theory on the first of what has become quite a few reunion shows, Scoot Andrews and Austin Theory, when I say they tore the house down, it was ridiculous. It was like Scoot had never missed a beat. He's 50 years old. I mean, no punches pulled. This guy showed up looking like he's 30, working like he's 25. At the time, I was telling everybody, you'll be watching this kid here. He'll be headlining WrestleMania here within the next 10 years. I changed that now to maybe 5 years, but it wasn't like it wasn't like I was some genius looking into a crystal ball. All you had to do was look at Austin Theory and go, holy shit. This guy is a high school bodybuilding champion, what might be one of the best looking guys you'll meet in wrestling, and is ultra talented. The only thing that I ever had that I kind of thought was a knock against him, but it isn't. It was what I've never personally have been into Randy Orton ever. And the entire reason is I always thought Randy Orton, everything looked too easy. Everything was too fluid. He's so athletic that he makes the most difficult deal look like. Me getting up and walking across the kitchen right now looks clumsier than him doing some insane, 10 second spot that's so fluid that it looks effortless, and a lot of times I don't feel it looks like a struggle or a fight because he's so good. I felt that way about Austin Theory, but his selling is at a different level, which kind of got rid of that opinion for me. And I guess if I'm saying that, I don't think it could be taken as an insult that I'm saying somebody's too good.
Yeah.
And that's what I still feel that way about Randy. There's nothing about a Randy Orton match that does anything for me, and it's because he's too good. And that's silly, but you know what? I'd rather have somebody that maybe every single spot and every move and everything they do isn't perfect. Yeah, I mean, where it goes. I like the idea of, hey, was that supposed to happen? Yeah, I mean, a little bit of that. I like when it looks a little rougher on the edges. I like when maybe somebody got pissed at a certain deal and maybe gave up one potato, just to kind of where you go, okay, yeah, I know what's going on there, But, Austin, to say they got a rocket strapped to his back, holy shit, man. It was
it was just obvious. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when he was going to, pop up. And, now he's on Raw every week, yeah.
And he's going to kill it, and you got everybody sitting back waiting for, they're going to cut his legs out from underneath him. Yeah, of course they are. They do that with everybody. And then just thank God Kane isn't there, so they can't program him in a feud with that. I've never seen a Kane match that I liked. And it would be funny for, 10, 15 years. Every young guy, especially if they're smaller, once they catch fire, they somehow put him in a program with Kane. And it'd be just like, well, here goes their spark and fire for a while. And I think they do some of that stuff just to see how you react and how you crawl back from it,
Yeah,
and Austin,
sometimes even if you, do everything you can, sometimes it kills your momentum and they never get back, and it's not even their fault, man. We mentioned some past stars. Who are you high on right now? We've thrown out names like Snoop and Saeed and Fabu. Who else are you a fan of going today?
There's some guys out there that, it almost seems unfair because, like I said, I haven't done a ton with some of these guys, but the Metro brothers have really got my attention. They're insane, buddy. I can't even think of Matt. I can't even think of his last name anymore. I'd had him on a couple shows in FIP. Used him. Matt Del Rey. He could be a star.
I was going to say Matt Del Rey. Yeah.
Yeah, he could be a star, but I'm pretty sure he's certifiable, like mental case. I mean, I have no doubt about it. I think that if he's given the opportunity, look at that house, man. I mean, can you imagine? It's funny because I really believe if given these type of venues and these type of settings, I could do that every single time we run.
There's the Metros and Del Rey on the outside fight.
Yeah. I really see big things in those guys. I think Snoop, but I mean, everybody thinks that now. He's already there in MLW. I think Zach, if he gets himself into the top shape that I believe he's trying to do, Zach Cooper could end up being probably one of the biggest stars to come out of here in quite a while. It's
definitely a lot of upside there for sure.
Troy and Hunter, but they're no secret, and truthfully, they're definitely veteran status already now. So it's kind of a lot of guys that I'll bring up or talk about and go, oh, hey man, this kid's really got something going. Some of them are kind of in the spot now where it's like shit or get off the pot. It's time to fucking do it. I've kind of always had this opinion that guys that choose to throw all their stuff in the back of a car and just find a way. I mean, if they've already got the talent, but they eat when they can, they sleep where they can, they do whatever it takes to make it. Those guys tend to make it compared to those of us who chose to work a shoot job. Like, there's never been a time that I haven't had a full-time job in this business. And I've always had a family, and a lot of other stuff going on. And I acted and lived 100 miles an hour like I was going to make it. But, what would have happened if I would have just said, this is what I'm doing? I mean, and go wherever there's really move to Philly or New York or Puerto Rico or Japan or wherever, and just try to make it. The best example I can give of that is Darby Allin. I mean, his whole story it's true. There is nothing that he tells about that story that's embellished or that he's elaborating to try to make it stuff. He legit lived in his car, like, showered when he could, use the local gym to shower. Christ, he had, like a George Foreman-y little thing that he would make his food there too. And, scratching and clawing, doing everything he could to make it. And guys I remember from when I was just getting going that were like that was Rob Van Dam was like that. I want to say Jerry Lynn was like that. There was guys that, they'd have a girl in every town. You know what I mean? And that's how they'd get by. Or they'd have friends in these other towns and get by and, like I said, survive. It's the same as musicians. If you're willing to take the risk, you have a better opportunity of making it. Doesn't mean it's guaranteed either, though. It may end terribly for you. I mean, it might, but you can never be told that you didn't chase your dream and didn't try. So I think Treehouse and Saeed are good examples of that. I think those guys are living that life, that this is what they do. I think Effie's taking a big step in that direction. I think it was a tragic time to make that decision when all business gets shut down a couple weeks later. But Effie's the type of guy that I'd said to him, I want to say it was right before Mania, I'd seen his schedule and I said, hey man, not that you need to hear it from me, but it's only a matter of time. And he said, what matter of time of what? So just keep doing what you're doing. Somebody's going to sign you. I don't even think he's interested based on the conversation. He wants to be a true independent, call his own shots, make his own money, wrestle when he wants to, appear when he wants to, do what he wants to. I don't ever get the feeling he'd be the type of guy that would make demands that are just, like, hey man, you're
Right.
not being here. But I think he truly marches to the beat of his own drummer. And I think he could be one of the biggest breakout stars that whenever shit opens back up, I think Effie could be a massive, massive, huge star. And he's in big shape and a big, tough guy too. I think people misinterpret when they see the character just online and all of a sudden they meet him. And this isn't just some little guy that he's not a pushover. I think he could be a huge act. I think Saeed and Tree could be. I do think though that, there's a lot of the cool kids out there that have kind of deemed themselves as the overs. That ain't really good. You know what I mean? If you're surrounding yourself with a bunch of people that y'all sit around and jerk each other off all day and say how fucking great you are, you should be getting booked and these guys shouldn't be getting booked. Well, there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? You're not good. And it's cool if you want to do this as a hobby. And there's a lot of groups like Fest and others out there that like to cater a lot to some of these guys. There's always going to be a place for you to work. There's also, I think, a little bit of I talked about at length with Zach Romero about this one time. He and I get along extremely well, and we come from two complete opposite ends of the world as far as philosophy and psychology.
That's why I love wrestling. It brings all these different
Isn't it
together.
cool? Yeah, it's cool, dude. I like that. And we were talking about something, and there's guys and girls that I think him and his friends and their people are into that I have an opinion that I think it's cool that you support them, but I also can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, you can't truly will somebody into being over. You can't. You can try, you know what I mean? But if they ain't good or they don't get it or they don't have what it takes and they're never booked against veterans because everybody's afraid to put some of these guys in there for fear of what might happen to them, man, listen, how do you ever learn if you're not in there with anybody any better or somebody with experience? You got fucking blind leading the blind out there on a regular basis, man. And they really are convinced that they're on their way. They're on their way nowhere. If you want to be, you guys got your deal down there. If somebody was very comfortable with you and you're very comfortable with them and the local fans like them, hey man, they can be your star in that fucking town 10 more years if they want to. That's it. That's all you're doing. That's all you're going to go. Winter Haven had that for many years. Fort Pierce had that for many years. They're local. When I talk regional, to me, Florida's regional. When you're so goddamn regional that you're like the Main Street of Winter Haven heavyweight champion, you're not in the same fucking wrestling world that I am. And you don't belong there. And I'll never act like you do. So, if some of these guys are willing to get out there and branch out, work with more experienced talent, work with better talent, learn, shut up, Don't run your own shows when all of a sudden you're not getting what you want, so you can put yourself on top. The sky's the limit, but there is a huge amount of guys and girls out there right now that don't belong. And like I said, the wrestling's for everyone. Okay, that's cool. Y'all just do your own thing, and as a guy that runs shows, you as an example should always want these guys getting better and learning more. Maybe for just your odds are that much better that there aren't going to be unnecessary injuries on your shows either from, the blind leading the blind and tripping over each other all over the place and stuff. I always took green boys and rookies and to say they took a savage beating and would learn the tough way. They would, but they would be in there with guys that had been around forever. Every student I had or I inherited from another place, hey, they're a student. They would start in the security role, where you'd be you could always tell the young wrestlers were the security, where then finally they might get worked into an angle of some sort, and then they end up in an underneath program, but with a vet. And they would learn so much, and it just went on from there. Pretty soon, when two young guys had enough knowledge that they could have a good match together, I would start going that route, but it took time to get to that point. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. No, and I think it is important here. And luckily, a lot of people do know that too. That they need to get in the ring with people that are better than them. That's how you learn.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's how you'll get to that next level. You're not going to learn anything from anyone that's just as experienced, if not less experienced than you, most likely. Where do we see? We're gonna have to start wrapping this up here pretty soon. Here, it's been a great discussion. I know there's a lot more that we didn't even get to cover here. Um, what's up with Ron Niemi now? What do you got cooking in the pot here? IPW still going? Obviously we're at a standstill right now, but when things are back in focus, where we catch you? What do you got going on?
Well, I've talked to several of the key players to find out how available they are, how much they got left in the tank. Because I use some older dudes, not a lot, and I try to rotate them so I'm not killing them. I mean, if I could get maybe 2, 3, 4 matches on the veterans per year, and then build up the newer generation underneath to be the new top guys, that's what I would like to do. But I've talked to all the key guys. Steve Madison is my partner. Sideshow is going to be taking a much more active role. I plan on running a busier schedule. I plan on getting far more involved as far as trying to get guys back on the international scene. I used to do a lot of that back in the day with IPW. The Shane brothers lost and regained the IPW World Tag Belts to the Road Warriors in Japan way back in the day. Naftali, I've already said, is Milo Beasley. He defended the IPW Cruiserweight title against Winger for Big Japan Pro Wrestling at Korakuen Hall. I've sent guys to China. I've sent guys to England for Brian Dixon's All-Star Wrestling, which is actually still going to this day. We used to send people to World Wrestling Council for Carlos, and we also used to send them to IWA Puerto Rico for Victor Quiones when Luke Williams was the booker. So I had a big hand internationally in getting Florida guys out there that I want to explore those options again. And I really want to start trying to feed more guys to the majors here. I love, to have a better relationship with MLW. I think I would be a good fit there. They seem to, change their commentators as much as I change my socks. So I'd love to be there. I don't see myself back with WWN, which is a shame. They don't need me and I don't need them, but I think we're both better when we're together. But that's just a relationship. I don't just burn bridges. I usually take, and explode them and then back up over with my tank and then rebuild and burn it again. So I plan on running more. I might take I might put myself out there a little bit more, because really, like last year, other than my own stuff, I did a little for you and Pablo. I think that was it. Most times when I'm approached, I don't feel like ruin most of these promoters' days, because I really am not easy to deal with, and I recognize that. I usually just give them a price that I know they're going to say no. Yeah, I mean,
you were good to me. You're good to me, brother.
Yeah, but you get it, and you're trying. And truthfully, Zach is somebody that I look at. Your partner. I look at Zach, and I think if he had a me while he was coming up, he would be a major player on the deathmatch scene. He really would be. I kind of get the feeling when I watch what he does online that he's gravitates to people, not you, but you guys are kind of presenting a different version of him than what I see on these other, as you can tell, I'm paying attention. Kind of gravitate to people or groups that really aren't going to do anything for him. It's fun and it's a nice rub being in there with some of these other guys. But, what I did with Chaos back in the day, I look at Zach as a far more modern, more marketable version, and death matches are now hot. They went from something that it seemed like yesterday to me, and I'm sure you'd remember, those garbage shit show deathmatch guys, they don't fucking belong. Now everybody is. Every time I pull up a picture, somebody's got those things sticking out of their head.
Yeah, you know what I mean? To the point out people are doing without rings. People are just having brawls.
Insane. Yeah, it's insane, and it's I'm all for it. I do wish that it could be toned down. I know they're death matches. I really don't look forward to the day that somebody is killed in there. And they're becoming so extreme that it seems like that would almost have to be the next step. But again, I look at him and I'm just looking at him going, holy shit, when me and him killed, we would have just killed it back in the day. I want to have more of an influence with people who are willing to listen. I'm really not all that interested in doing a lot more indies. I do think that at one time I would have been a good fit as far as creating some chaos and controversy with Fest and with Leon Scott being up there helping with pulling the strings. He's always been somebody that he gets it, and me and him have always kind of collaborated well together. So who knows, maybe down the road. But again, I always kind of envision, like when I think of shows like that, I think of 300 people with mustaches that are curled up and, fucking scarves and whatever, like the hipsters of hipsters.
Yeah, they got a certain crowd and it's working, it seems like, for them.
It's working for them. If that showed up at my show, I'd look out the curtain and think that you had pulled a giant rib on me and talked to all these people to come as a fight. I'd take their money and be happy they were there, and I'd appreciate the shit out of all the Pabst Blue Ribbons that they're all drinking for some reason, and their vape pens. It's like I've always said, like, I've got a 19-year-old daughter and I got a 14-year-old boy, and then I got older kids, but I've always have kind of prided myself on getting it when it comes to entertainment, whether it's music, TV, movies, take your pick. I don't go to plays and I'm not going to poetry slams, but I can honestly say I don't get it a good part of the time now. I really don't. And you'll notice from the times you talk to me or anybody that follows me on Facebook or Twitter, I don't feel the need to come out and slam everything I don't get. If I don't like it, I don't watch it. If I don't like it, that's it. It's as simple as that. If I don't like it, watch it and support it. But that don't mean that other people don't like it, right?
Yeah, it doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means it's just not for you.
Not for
exactly.
Me.
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. I've never gotten where, YouTube is the worst example of just people going, this is horrible. No, it's bad to you. Click away. It's very easy to click away.
Well, intergender matches, that's to this day, most of the time, I just don't get it. Okay, that's it. That's the end of the story. I don't feel the need to, I've been, since I broke in, since the day I broke in, I've always been outspoken. I knew when and where, or I didn't care, whose toes I stepped on, and it would be by design. But anybody would be like, well, that would never happen. Okay. I was saying back in 91 that I broke in that there may be no move more ridiculous in wrestling than the fucking Irish whip. So I'm going to take your arm and push your back, and you're going to run all the way across the ring. You're going to bounce off of those ropes and then turn around and run at me with no defense whatsoever and wait for me to hit you with a wrestling move. Okay. If that isn't ridiculous, nothing is ridiculous. So this whole, that wouldn't happen in a shoot. None of this shit would. It's fucking right. Stop.
If we were fighting, I wouldn't put on nice sparkly pants and I put you in a headlock when I can just punch you a bunch of times.
We're gonna get oiled up, stripped down to our underwear, and settle it like men.
Wow, it's a show, man, and it's the greatest show on earth, in my opinion.
Me too. That's what I said. I said it earlier. Give me wrestling, Kiss, and Star Wars. I don't need anything else. That's it.
I agree 2/3. I don't know too much about Kiss. I like them a little bit, but yeah, I'm 2/3 of the way there with you.
Well, if you like Slipknot or anything like that, they're just modern what Kiss was doing. It's a sideshow.
No, absolutely. No, I know they were a show too, which is cool. For sure. for sure. I am aware of the Kiss Demon though. He was a good wrestler.
Oh my God! I went to something like in the last few years, and he was there. He had a pretty decent career as in Major League Baseball as
Yeah,
he was a trainer. I want to say he was with the Marlins for quite a while.
yeah,
I'm not
Florida,
sure who
I think,
he's with
right?
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of, I don't know if he was ever going to make it anyway, but he was doomed when they got that. They paid serious money for that. I want to say maybe like $750,000 or something like that. They paid for the
Yeah, from
rights.
what I've heard, yeah, it's something one of those crazy WCW spendings that just it didn't equal what it got
No,
by
it made,
far.
and I was a giant Kiss fan, and I'm going, this don't even have a chance, especially because it was put with this unknown guy that nobody cared about at all.
Yeah,
I think he kind of thought that was like like anyone else. I mean, who wouldn't? Shit, yeah, I'll do that. And next thing you know, it went nowhere.
yeah. That was a toughie for that guy, man. Here, and anything else you want to say before we head off for the day?
No, man, I appreciate you taking the time
Absolutely.
to do this, and I hope everybody's doing well out there. It's kind of a bummer because you would think with what's going on that this would kind of hold the country closer together and hold people closer together, but it seems like it's kind of having the opposite effect. And somehow the virus has either become a Democrat or a Republican, and I don't quite
Yeah,
get that.
that's kind of nuts. Yeah.
If anyone's ever going to take any advice from me, who cares about wrestling side? I mean, just, don't fall for that. And, keep your friends and your family and everybody close, and, a positive attitude, and maybe going out of your way when instead of sitting around and being pissed off, maybe, try doing something for somebody else, and you'd be surprised at how it would make you feel. I've been lucky to be able to keep working. My wife has been lucky to keep working. But I've also been lucky to been able to spend more time with them than I ever really would if we weren't in this situation. So I don't know, just use it, pick up a book and read. You ain't read in a long time, find a new hobby, something that you haven't done. Use the time
Absolutely.
creatively, or just sit back and drink and watch movies, relax, take it easy.
Yeah, I'm guaranteed there's something on Netflix or Amazon Prime
Sure.
that you haven't seen yet. If you like wrestling, like we said, there's a bunch of 9.99 stations you can
You're
watch.
right, man.
IPW's on YouTube. We're pros on YouTube. Check out all this. Ron Niemi's on both. Check him out. Uh, Ron, it's been a pleasure, man. Definitely have to pick your brain again in another time here, man. I've always enjoyed talking to you. I knew you'd be great on this. I appreciate
All
you
right, brother.
taking time, man.
Thank you. I'll see you again soon as we can get out of this stuff.
Once the apocalypse is over, we'll reunite, man. Coming to that next IPW show, I think that'll be a treat for me, man. Guys, thanks for checking out Kayfabe Corner, and as always, keep it kayfabe.